Now that we understand the character settings, let's take a look at some of the paragraph settings offered inside of Illustrator. Again, I'm going to go to the window menu here. I'm going to go down to where it says type. I'm going to open up my paragraph panel, not a paragraph styles. We'll do that later. We'll talk about paragraph right now. So these are the paragraph settings. Once again, there are many options here. I could either choose this setting up here for hide options as we work, or whenever you see these little up and down arrows inside of the title of any particular tab here, when you click on that, that can simply go ahead and turn those settings or toggle between them as well. So I'm just going to make sure that all the settings here are visible. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this paragraph right here. You can see that this allows me to determine how my paragraph is aligned: left, center, right. Justified settings mean that the left and the right are all going to be the same in a straight line, and we'll talk more about some of the nuances of those settings as well. This basically determines what the last line of your paragraph would be. So these are all justified settings, but this means justified last line is aligned left. This one is a justified last line is centered, last line is right, and here all lines are justified as well. Now, notice over here that these paragraphs all kind of run into each other. Many times in a book, when you have lots of paragraphs, each paragraph has a little indent, right? The first line is indented. So if you look over here, I see that this setting over here is called first line indent. By adjusting this particular setting here, you can see that the beginning of all the particular paragraphs are now indented, which makes it a little bit easier on the eye to identify where those paragraphs begin. I also have a setting here called space before. Space before basically automatically adds spaces before the beginning of each paragraph. And again, Illustrator identifies a paragraph as a hard return. So if you have a return or you press the enter key on a particular keyboard, that means, okay, it's start of a new paragraph. There's also a setting for space after paragraph. You may want to be able to have some paragraphs that have space before. Some of them may have space after, so on and so forth. And when we get into more complex uses for typography, we'll see where those would make sense to do so. There's also, by the way, the ability to just have left and right indents for your particular text as well. So for example, if I thought this was some kind of a quote, I could take this paragraph and maybe have an indent in this particular paragraph here this way, and we'll also do, let's say, a right indent this way as well. Of course, the text, because this is area text, will just simply reflow in that particular area. So those are a few of the settings that are available here. I just want to point out, by the way, if you look to the far right here, you see how the text, even though it's set to be justified, doesn't really look like it's that straight, and that's because there are commas and hyphens and so on and so forth. Well, there is a setting inside of Illustrator. If you go to the flyout menu over here of the paragraph panel, something called Roman hanging punctuation. When you choose that particular setting, it will basically align your text so that the punctuation actually hangs out beyond the margin. So the optical illusion basically is that you have a visual straight line, as opposed to before where it was really justified but didn't look that way. So that might be an interesting setting that you might want to use for some of your paragraphs. Another important paragraph setting that's here, if you go to the flyout menu once again, is something called the Adobe Single Line Composer versus the Adobe Every Line Composer. And this is important to know. The Single Line Composer basically looks at each line as it sets a type, tries to figure out how many words are in that line, how many words fit in that line, where the hyphenation might fall, and then it puts the words on each line after that. However, if you use the Adobe Every Line Composer, what Illustrator tries to do is that even after it flowed an entire paragraph of text, if it sees that there are some things that, like for example, this line here looks like it's a very loose line, it has lots of space in between each of the words. So if there may be better ways to attribute that, the Every Line Composer would do a better job of avoiding those loose lines. So I can do that simply by clicking on this and choosing the Every Line Composer, and the text now reflows and I don't see that loose line anymore. It does a nice job on making that happen, but it also means that text would reflow as you're typing, which can be disconcerting to some people as you're working. Just something to know. You might want to test it out for the different paragraphs that you're working on. So now you know how to apply settings to the character level and to the paragraph level inside of Illustrator. Let's talk a little bit more, though, about working with area text, because as we see over here, area text itself is basically encompassed within a certain frame, and there may be times when you want text to flow from one frame into another frame. In the next movie, we'll discuss how that's done inside of Illustrator.